Hey everybody, in this video we're going to talk about the HEX origin address because it's been explained a whole bunch of times by various members of the community and Richard Hart himself, but I feel like a lot of people still don't get it. And maybe you're hung up about this if you're on the fence about HEX, or maybe this really bothers you for whatever reason. And I think it's a common misconception that not a lot of people even want to take the time to dig into and keep an open mind about. So I'm going to try to explain it from a different point of view in a short bite-sized video, so you don't have to go fishing through a 2 or 3 hour long Richard Hart live stream or anything like that, and just get the perspective of why the origin address is not actually a bad thing at all for the HEX project, and why it was specifically programmed into the HEX smart contract itself so that it could be a benefit to the actual product. So I'll try to reword things in a way that might be more digestible, and again, if you don't like hearing it from Richard, maybe I'll be able to change your mind, and if not, there's probably going to be a good portion of you that are still going to finish this video and still hate HEX because you're just mad that somebody owns more HEX than you. And that's all it really is at the end of the day. One of the critical things about HEX is that there's no admin keys like a lot of DeFi products out there, that can actually hack in and change the rules of the smart contract. So smart contracts were designed and supposed to be immutable code that lives on a blockchain. And immutable means uneditable. But unfortunately in cryptocurrency, there's been a precedent set that the developers of whatever product or project they're building can just add a backdoor, change up the rules, freeze people's accounts, change the code, change the laws itself. And that's not what crypto is supposed to be about. So the point of cryptocurrency was supposed to be able to get rid of middlemen, because people in the middle can become corrupt and can change the rules to benefit them. We've seen this with the Federal Reserve, right? They get to change the interest rates basically on a whim, and they get to print as much inflation as they want. And basically it's creating a crazy, chaotic, hyperinflationary environment across the whole world and a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen. Crypto is supposed to fix all that. And so one thing that you should know about HEX, if you don't know this already, is that it's actually immutable and locked code. So we'll get into the origin address in a minute. Stick around till the end because we're going to explain all the points, all the counterpoints, and all the misconceptions and myths about just how people think wrong about this whole thing. Let's get right into it. So if you don't know by now, one of the most common anti-HEX points is that it was programmed in with what's called the origin address that received about 50% of the coins upon the creation of HEX. And it's speculated that, as time went on, the address actually acquired more coins, and people speculate, and people have actually audited it and found that it probably owns about 80% of the coins at this moment in time, which will change as it dilutes itself over time. I'll get into that at the end of the video, so stick around. But a lot of people seem to have a problem with this and not really know why they have a problem. I hear some common things over and over again about, oh, Richard Hart's going to dump on your head. Richard Hart is the founder, by the way. As if a founder would want to self-destruct their own product and just run away with everyone's money. Someone that's already been rich and retired for years, mind you, that's actually trying to help people. But people don't want to look into that, right? People want to have these misconceptions because I think a lot of times we project what we would do onto other people. So people might think, oh, well, if I had all that money, I would just rug pull, dump, and then run away. But it's hard for people to realize that this is a product not only designed to basically give people a new chance at truly financial freedom and real wealth, but also it's a long-term financial product, and it's designed to last multiple years, meaning multiple bull and bear cycles. It's not just a quick pump and dump. It's not a Ponzi or pyramid. People use these words all wrong too. People say Ponzi, and scam, and it's really tiring to hear these words, especially when people spew them without really looking up the dictionary definition. So a Ponzi scheme is when you give somebody money and then that person promises you a crazy high rate of return. And the way that they pay that return is by going to a new investor, getting them to invest, promising them a similar return, and then using the new investor's money to pay the old investor. So it's a classic scheme. It involves people with actual promises, middlemen in real life, making promises and taking money from new people and giving it to old people. So I want to be very clear about how HEX works. In HEX, you make interest for staking, and that interest simply comes from the inflation of the coin that's programmed into the smart contract at a constant and unchangeable rate of 3.69% per year, right? So every year, the coin inflates 3.69%, and that inflation is divvied up proportionally among everybody that's staking in the system, proportional to how much you have staked. So if I'm a bigger staker, I'll get more of that interest. Smaller, I'll get a little smaller amount. But it's a rule that can't be changed. But I'm diverging away from the topic a little bit. We're here to talk about the origin address specifically. We can talk about the other counterpoints in other videos. So let's talk about some misconceptions. One thing people say is, well, why would I want to get involved in something where any one person can just dump the price to zero overnight? right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that that argument holds true for literally pretty much any asset out there, right? This includes stocks, real estate, and especially true for crypto, right? Now, I want to point out that there's always more supply of a cryptocurrency or of anything than there is actually liquid available on the market. There's always more houses in real estate out there than there is actually real estate for sale. There's always more stocks out there than there are actually stocks liquid on various markets. And this is especially true for crypto as well. There's far more Bitcoin supply out there than there is that's actually liquid. In fact, much of Bitcoin's supply is considered dormant because it hasn't moved for years. And this is a good thing, right? People holding and never selling helps the price go up because it creates scarcity. And it means that the amount that is available in liquid is smaller, so the demand that people have to compete for that smaller supply pushes the price higher, okay? Now, like I said, this is true in literally any market. There are individuals that have the power to dump Tesla, right? Elon Musk owns probably 30% of the company. Do you think there's 30% of all stock even liquid on the market? The answer is no. And so if Elon Musk just went totally AWOL and decided to destroy his own company and sell all of his stock, sure, he could crash the price probably to almost zero. You know, does that worry you about getting into Tesla stock? And if so, don't get into it. I'm not trying to sell you on HEX either. Yeah, this is possible to do in HEX, but for the same reason that Elon Musk and Bezos don't want to self-destruct their own products, it's the same reason that everybody just kind of keeps the game going. There are real estate companies in my city and your city that probably have the ability to liquidate all of their real estate at any one time. Hell, even if maybe 10% of the neighbors in your neighborhood tried selling their houses all at the same time, the property values around you would crash very, very low. I mean, we live in an imagined reality that's sometimes more fragile than people think, but the way that it all works is that people aren't insane psychopaths for the most part, right? And so people don't choose to all sell at the same time, especially not the big whales and the big holders. So the big holders of Bitcoin, right? Chamath Palihapitiya, Cameron Winklevoss, Tyler Winklevoss, Grayscale Investments. These people all own more than 1% of all Bitcoin. Who else? Jack Dorsey. There's plenty of people out there that could crash the Bitcoin price to zero if they went ahead and took their big bag of 100,000 Bitcoin or however much they have and just dumped it in a big market sell. Why don't they do this? Again, it's just how incentives are aligned, and whales are more incentivized than everyone to keep the value of the thing that they own high. I mean, if people are incentivized by greed, this is actually a good thing, and you start to realize that. Okay, people aren't just totally chaotic psychopaths that want to get a lot of something and then instantly dump it, sending the price to zero. So, if the argument's starting to seem a little silly to you by now, good, and if not, we're going to keep going. Again, the richest people in the world are also the least incentivized to sell, right? When you have a certain point of money, it doesn't change the quality of life that you have anymore. And so the uber rich people of the world, it's hard to realize as someone that might not be in the capital class, but, as someone in the middle class, we think that, you have to work hard to make money. The harder you work, the more you make. That's not actually true. The people in the real capital class, they buy assets that produce income for them. And then they can do all kinds of tricks like take out loans on their assets if they really want to buy anything else. And it turns out a lot of multimillionaires and billionaires, they don't need anything else. They have their 5 mansions and they have their, rocket ships to space, and there's only so much money you can spend on yourself. So a lot of times the big whales and companies or CEOs or, founders of cryptocurrencies, they want to keep the money to use as leverage for future endeavors, right? They want to just hold the value that they have so that the price continues to go up. And on paper, they do have all this money, and that can open a lot more opportunities for them to do other ventures in the future. Like, for example, the founder of HEX wants to donate a lot and actually recently put together $25 million in donations to the Sens Foundation, which is a longevity fund that could actually save all of our lives. So you'll find that when people have money, for the most part, if they're not good, they're at least neutral. I don't know a lot of super rich, evil people out there. Granted, there are some people that may not realize that, they're acting unethical. We can go into that at other times, but most of the people that want to get rich want the power to influence the world, and the majority of the time it's actually for what they think is for the better, okay? So this hatred of the rich often comes from jealousy and not understanding that money and power is actually a tool to progress the world forward. And again, a lot of people look at the circulating supply and they think that they confuse that with liquidity. So like I said earlier, right? For example, there's 500 or 600 billion total HEX coins circulating, quote unquote circulating, but that doesn't mean that they're liquid. And that actually means that the word circulating is probably a little bit of a misnomer, right? But what else are we going to call it, right? Basically, it's just coins that are not locked up, that are free to move at any point, but often don't. So I think a big part of circulating supply of any coin should actually be better named dormant supply. This is especially true for Bitcoin too. Satoshi Nakamoto, the founder of Bitcoin himself, owns about 1 million tokens. And they haven't moved since the very, very early days, like year one of Bitcoin's entire existence. So the longer they sit there without moving, doesn't it seem more reasonable to assume that, well, maybe they never will move? Maybe we can consider them dormant, right? But if you're worried about, the founder of HEX dumping all the coins overnight, maybe you should also be worried and paranoid about Satoshi Nakamoto coming back and, what if he gave his private keys to his children and they decided to just dump the coins overnight? These fears start to seem kind of silly and hypocritical when you start to apply them to any other financial instrument. And we'll do a good example of this later so you can see what I really mean, okay? But like I mentioned, to sum it all up, there are whales in any asset that could destroy the price if they want to. They just simply don't need to and don't want to. Finally, I think one of the reasons that people have a weird feeling about HEX is that it's so different from a lot of other things in the market. And that was because it was intentionally designed to follow securities laws. And for those of you that don't know what qualifies as security, it's actually kind of an old law judged by what's called the Howey test. And the Howey test has 4 legs, right? So there are 4 statements that if your product, whatever, stock, financial vehicle, abides by these 4 legs of the Howey test, it can be deemed a security by the US SEC in the United States. And that would put it at risk of not being able to be listed on various exchanges. So HEX was designed in such a way that it follows the security laws as best as it can. So the Howey test says that you must have an investment of money into a common pool with the expectation of profit from the work of others. An investment of money into a common pool with the expectation of profit from the work of others. And now the expectation of profit from the work of others part was specifically taken out of HEX. And the founder, Richard Hart, will repeatedly say like a broken record that you should expect nothing in return from the origin address. The origin address will never do anything. You should never expect any profit from the work of the origin address. And that's why HEX was launched fully complete, right? HEX is a completed product, unlike 99% of any other cryptocurrency out there, which are always being made updated and always being made better. HEX is actually final and locked and finished, which is why it's such a curveball and why a lot of people have a hard time understanding it. So in cryptocurrency, we have this habit that's been drilled into our bodies and our minds, where we expect promises from the work of others. Now, I don't want to call out coins, but coins like Cardano, if you hold Cardano, it's great. I love it. It's fine. But the whole thing is built on promises of work being done in the future. I mean, I can name a million other coins, but I don't want to piss people off by, talking negatively about coins. But a lot of these coins out there, people are conditioned to go to the website and look for a pie chart of some kind of allocation of the coins. And they want to see, 15% is going to marketing, 5% is going to the founders, 25% is going to VCs. As if, having the certainty of this pie chart and knowing how the coins are allocated, or basically how the coins are promised to be used, that somehow makes people feel better. But guys, I've been in crypto since 2015, and I've seen time and time again, it doesn't matter what somebody puts on a pie chart on a website, people don't always come through on their promises. So I prefer to invest in HEX because it's actually something that's completed, and I don't have to worry about Richard Hart doing anything in the future, right? He could get hit by a bus, and HEX would totally run completely smoothly and fine because it's finished, locked, immutable, audited 3 times, 100% uptime, never been hacked, all this great stuff, right? But I think people are so conditioned to their promises that when they see a founder not offering any promises of future work, a lot of people get confused. And it's understandable if you're new to crypto, right? So I'm not trying to bash you, especially if this is your first year or 2 into crypto. I mean, there's people promising all these great things, And guys, I saw it in 2017, 2016, 2015. The amount of these times that these promises actually work out is very, very few and far between. But in HEX, we don't promise any profit from the work of others. In HEX, you are the network. So if you want something good to happen, if you want to do marketing, you do it yourself, kind of like I'm doing right now, right? And with you being the network, it's distributed and the responsibility is distributed, and it takes away from expectation of profit from a central entity. You know, in HEX, there's no company, there's no CEO, there's no room full of people. It's just a bunch of people at their computers, like you and me. So I think that's pretty cool, and I think it's a lot of fun to be a part of. Now, just in case you were still a little irked or unnerved about the origin address owning approximately 80% of the HEX tokens, well, the origin address does that now, right? But we could look at the staking class owning approximately, 20% more, right? And one interesting thing is that somebody's actually audited the origin address, and I'll post the link in the description below. The origin address has only staked a few times and has really left most of their HEX liquid. And by doing that, like I mentioned earlier, inflation in HEX is paid to the stakers only, which means the origin address, by not staking, is actually diluting itself and allowing the interest to be paid primarily to the actual staker class of people. So imagine this concentric circle is year one. So the origin address, yeah, it owns the majority of the coins, but the stakers are able to buy and stake from the liquidity on the market. And every year, they're getting all the inflation, right? And the origin address is not really getting much more inflation. So the middle circle is the OA, and the outer concentric circle is like retail, all the stakers. And every year after that, the stakers get more and more of the inflation, and the origin address keeps diluting itself. So now look, as a percentage of the outer circle, as opposed to the inner circle, it now seems that the origin address only owns less of a percentage, right? And this is a visual example. But, let's say after year 2, the OA, instead of owning 80%, only owns 70%. And maybe after year 3, they own about 65%. Maybe after year 4, about 60%. So on these multi-year time frames, you could see that if the OA acts in the way that it's been acting, right, by giving people an even chance to all become stakers and part of the staker class, it's actually diluting itself and will eventually hold a lower percentage of the coins. So that's just a visual, just to project out into the future and show you how the OA will actually become less dominant over time, and how in the early days, it needs to have a lot of these coins in order to prevent a lot of price dumping, right? If you give a little bit of equal amount of coins to everybody, we've seen it before, guys. There's a lot of examples I can give you that I actually show in previous videos where coins were given for free and airdropped in quote unquote a fair distribution. But when a fair distribution happens, guys, there's what's called tragedy of the commons. Nobody is incentivized to see the product do well because nobody really worked for the coins. They were all just airdropped an even amount of coins. So if you give 100 people 1% of the supply, chances are they're all the first thing they're going to do is they're going to go to the market and they're going to see, hey, how much can I sell these for? How much can I dump these for in the market, right? Because I didn't do anything for these coins. I don't care about them. I want to see how much money I can get. I'm greedy and I want my money now. So in the beginning of projects, when projects are very new, you want somebody with a high incentive to see the product do well, right? In a project's infancy, you want a founder to keep a close eye on the product. And over time, as it becomes more distributed, the founder can quote unquote exit to the community, which this whole exit to the community idea over time is actually an idea touted by Vitalik Buterin, founder of Ethereum. I can post a link to that tweet below as well. But guys, just to show some of the hypocrisy of cryptocurrency, here's a list of the ERC20 tokens, the top tokens in all of etherscan.io. We've got 2 stablecoins, BNB. HEX is really number 2 besides stablecoins. It's pretty cool. And then let's take the other top ones that aren't stablecoins. Let's take Uniswap and Chainlink. Now, I don't want to talk crap about Chainlink or Uniswap, right? These are fine. If you hold them, that's great. I'm not promoting them, but if you hold them, I've got nothing against them. And I think they're both trying to do interesting things. Sure. Now, let's dig in, right? Let's drill into Uniswap, for example, right? And then we can go to the holders tab right here, and we can see some of the top holders in Uniswap. Now, look, a lot of this is locked up in a treasury. 13%, 12%, 8%, 4%, 3%. That's almost 50% of the coin right there in the top 10 holders alone, right? I mean, if you're mad about centralization, there's your centralization, right? But I really have to distinguish at this point, economic centralization is different than technical centralization, right? So does the Uni token have an admin key? That would be technical centralization. That means one developer can change up all the rules. Now that's different than one person, one investor, having a lot of coins to buy or sell. So again, I've said this in previous videos, but economic centralization actually works great in the real world. That's how things just function. Technical centralization is what we're trying to get away from in cryptocurrency. We don't want people to hold the keys to the kingdom and be able to change the rules, rug pull you, whatever it may be. So the first 5 addresses here are all smart contracts, and it looks like there's some kind of vesting contracts. So let's consider these irrelevant for now, just for the sake of the argument. Let's look at address number 6, right, or number 7. This guy, it's a normal address. He owns 21,532,000 tokens. Now, let's hop on over to app.uniswap.org and see what happens if that guy just decided to go AWOL and dump 21,536,000, I think that was the number, 21 million tokens on the open market. Let's see what happens if this guy tries to dump all those tokens on the open market. Oh look, what do you know? There's not enough liquidity in the system to even be able to handle that dump. So you would push the price down 99%, 99.9%, and you'd get about $400,000 if this one individual tried to sell all of his money at the same time, right? And that's one guy, right? So going back here, look at all these other individuals that have 12 million, 13 million, 15 million, 15 million. Any one of these people, it could be anybody out there. They could all decide to go totally AWOL one day, do a massive sell order, and totally nuke the price of the token. Why don't they? Because people aren't stupid, and especially whales, okay? Whales have a higher time preference than you. A higher time preference means they're not as scarcity thinking. They want to hold for long periods of time, and they want to see the things that they're invested in do well. And they're not stupid, guys. Nobody just dumps and exits at the same time. But the argument that this could happen in HEX, I'm only doing this right now to show you that it's actually valid for pretty much every other cryptocurrency under the sun. Let's take Chainlink, for example. Again, not trying to talk badly about Chainlink. Chainlink is fine. I have no problem with it at all. But for the sake of the argument, let's take a couple of these guys. You know, these top 3 are smart contracts. Oh, this one owns 35% of it. 35, 5, 5, 3, 3. The top 5 addresses here own about 50% of the token. But are people crying about that? For some reason, not as much as they are about HEX, right? But let's take a normal guy, somebody with a normal address that's not an exchange or anything. And let's take this guy with 10,145,000 Chainlink. What happens if I try to sell 10,145,000 Chainlink on the open market at the same time on uniswap.org, app.uniswap.org? Oh look, the price goes down 100%, okay? Because again, there's not enough liquidity in the market to handle a massive market sell order from one of the many whales out there. Again, many whales, right? So you could even make the argument that in HEX, because there's primarily one big whale, it's actually lower risk. You know, the risk of that one whale selling might even be lower, you could say, than the risk of any one of these guys selling. This guy, or 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 this guy. You know, it could happen, right? But it doesn't, and I'm not worried about it happening because that's how the world works, okay? Whales are incentivized in every system to hold the price up because they have a longer time preference. So hopefully this all made sense to you. Hopefully, if you were on the fence before, maybe you feel a little better about this argument. And if you still have cons, well, sorry you feel that way, but you might have a hard time in crypto in general. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.